All right, hello everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I know this is the last session of the day. I am so impressed you're still here and standing, especially after last night at the Pop Culture Museum. So it's great to see all of you. We are in the session around the clinical viewer as part of Healthshare, what has been released recently, thinking about the last year, and what's coming when we think about the next 12 to 18 months. For those of you who I have not met in person, my name is Julie Smith. I am a nurse by training, many years in the trenches of an emergency room trauma center before moving to hospital operations and all of the things that sort of go with that, and then wanted to see behind the curtain. Why are vendors choosing what they're choosing when they build out software, and how can we do that better? And so I've spent many years in that space at this point as well. One of my roles within Healthshare and InterSystems is responsibility for the clinical viewer. And so that's what we're sort of focused on for this portion of the session. But just be aware that Healthshare in general and InterSystems overall has really started putting a priority on what end users experience. And part of that is me joining the team as a nurse and hospital person. You saw Frank on the main stage as a physician working on the action engine. And there's actually a whole slew of us that are now embedded across products where we think about what are our end users experiencing and how do we speak that language better. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about what viewer is and what it's becoming. So our vision as a place where people access data is one to say we want to actually influence the delivery of care. We don't want to just surface up data. We want to give you meaningful information, and we want to make it make sense to you so that it can be used in a meaningful way. So let's take a deeper dive. Maybe. There you go. So with that, we're thinking about the whole experience end to end in a workflow. We're thinking about how you as implementers, as maintainers, as configurers, as developers within this space can update screens in a more meaningful, easy way. We're thinking about how you can create your own displays when you are not seeing what you're looking for out of the box. And we are thinking about how you can add data and what that means for you. So first, what you'll see in the most recent releases is a new framework called Navigation Application. For those of you who had the classic clinical viewer, you would have been familiar with some of the options within this space when you saw the message center, subscriptions, cohort management, if that sounds familiar to you. But this is the new frame that the clinical viewer may be embedded against as a child app that actually allows a user to navigate between Healthshare provided applications, like I mentioned, or third-party applications. You can embed Smart on Fire apps there. You can put what you want in that space so you can have one access point across those. You'll also see that separate from that navigation application, which is actually part of the UCR kit to allow users to use it who don't just use the viewer, within the viewer itself, we've changed some things. One we'll talk about is cross-version support. If you happen to attend the UCR New and Next session, you heard that there is increasing focus on time to value, cost of ownership, and one of the options and opportunities there is around how you can upgrade just the viewer kit without having to do an entire UCR upgrade. And then some of the views within CV itself have changed. So let's start with that navigation application. So you may have seen also in that UCR session that the login application that was released back in 21.1 is a net new experience for users. It is customizable by you without coding, which is new. It has configuration GUIs that allow you to do all of the different things that you want to set up there. And part of that is also moving beyond the login application and offering that for the navigation application as well. So in prior releases, this would have all been done through terminal commands. So you would have had to know what you were doing. And this is designed to be, again, easier to use where you, at an analyst level, at an implementer level, you can actually do this configuration. And so you'll see this is just one of the screens here, but it's everything from style, font, color, icons, to actually setting up your system settings, your instances settings, all of the different things that you need in order to indicate how you want to use the navigation application itself, what child apps you want embedded there, their sequence, their default, all of those things. And as you would have seen with the login application, out-of-the-box support now includes 8 languages. Now, obviously, this does not include child apps, right? Just because it's in the frame doesn't mean everything that you put in it will get translated. But it is the start of that journey to say your login application experience will be with whatever language it is that your user wants. So with their navigation application experience, this is saved across sessions, so you only have to set it once as an end user, and you'll see this continued path across Healthshare as we work to provide more and more of the tools within the product itself so that you don't have to do that work. So as I mentioned with cross-version support, if you remember, the Clinical Viewer kit became separate from the UCR kit a few years ago, many releases ago. But that didn't actually offer you the value you needed, besides the fact that now you have to install both, which wasn't great for you. That was part of the work, though, to set the stage for being able to do cross-version support. So starting with this most recent release, the Clinical Viewer kit, you can go ahead and upgrade on a prior UCR instance without having to do both. We know, as part of our work on time to value, cost of ownership, et cetera, that a UCR upgrade is long, expensive, complicated, and we want to make sure that you are not limited by that in order to get access to the new development within the viewer itself. So you can keep your UCR 21.2 instance and go ahead and just upgrade a CV kit, and that should flow seamlessly for you. That is certainly the plan moving forward too. The CV is not the only kit that's separated out and not the only one that has cross-versions compatibility at this point, but that is one of the goals across the Healthshare suite, to make sure that we are providing that flexibility for you for the pieces and parts that you need and to be able to access that value. So now actually jumping into what the screens look like. Before I sort of explain this screen, I just want a quick reminder as I glanced at everybody's name tags and seeing where all you come from. Many of you have been part of the migration from the classic clinical viewer to the newer clinical viewer. And so just want to provide a brief update of that. When I joined InterSystems back 2018, that was when the first release of the new clinical viewer came out, and it took some convincing to get that first customer, the first one of you to say, yeah, I'll give it a try, I understand the value here, and let's move that forward. At this juncture, many years later, almost everyone, not everyone, I know, looking at the room, but almost everyone has moved. All net new implementations are on the new viewer, and what we've learned through that experience is a couple of things. One, there was concerted work in 2019 to make sure we were no longer just providing the tools and the options for you to decide what to display, but we were actually displaying what makes sense for you. So most of the out-of-the-box screens changed that year. That was part of that initial initiative for the clinicians to be involved, to say, we actually want to show you what you probably already want, so you will make minimal changes, so that you have a more standardized viewer to use, which then will also help your upgrades, et cetera, go smoothly. What we've learned since that year, 2019, feels like a while ago, I know with COVID, is that we actually do have customers that use total 100% out-of-the-box viewer, which is unheard of with the classic. And so we want to acknowledge that migration had some challenges, but we're seeing the return there, because that upgrade then becomes that much easier, especially when you think about it in terms of only upgrading a CV kit. So in last year's virtual summit presentation, one of the things that I displayed was new search capabilities for profiles, new grouping, new filtering, all of these things. We have customers who are using that and have made some changes to those out-of-the-box configurations. One of the things we've put focus on is making sure those are just configurable options, no code. And the goal here is to continue down that path for something that is usable when you receive it. And if you need to change it, you can find a box to check, a field to complete without requiring development skills. So one of the things that came out in this most recent release is changes to vital sign graphs. If you happen to remember into the weeds of what the viewer looked like, the vital sign graphs that have been available up to this point were the legacy ones that came over from the classic viewer, not particularly usable from an end user perspective. It had to zoom out, zoom in, try to sort of get that glance into a trend without it necessarily being how you would think about it as a user. And that's all changed. So what we offer now are dynamic vital sign graphs that are end user controlled. So this is sort of, again, a new pathway into giving users what they need, where they can decide, hey, do I want to just see systolic trends of blood pressure? Do I just want to see temperature? What time frame do I want to look at? I can adjust the time frame, I can adjust the duration, I can adjust all of these different things on the fly so that I can see what matters to me in this moment when I'm evaluating my patient. So that's released as of the most recent release, and you'll see that in all of the kits available. Another thing that you'll see, this is actually, as I look at the names in the room, something I've gotten as a request from a couple of you, is one of the gaps from the classic clinical viewer was that we still did not display microbiology results. If you know a lot about lab results, and what that looks like from an EMR perspective or from a clinical perspective, you know that those are just not as straightforward as all the numbers you get when you get a hematocrit or hemoglobin or something like that. It actually goes line by line with all this detail about what antibiotics will be responsive to this and what you should use and what that means. And so it was a little bit more complex to pull in. But that is now available, that is in released product, and so you do get microbiology results now. That includes a legend, and you can sort of take a look at the sensitivities. Something else, and this is separate from, but in addition to the viewer, is one of the things that you may remember is our reports option, that you have a patient summary report, you have claims reports, you have these different reports that any end user can access as long as they have the right permissions to do so. One of the things that we added in a prior release was a new claims report to make sure that we're meeting every user's needs here. That initially only covered medical claims, because if you happen to follow the Healthshare roadmap as we did this, or if you were part of the CMS solution pack work, then you know that medical claims came first and pharmacy claims came second, and all of the different implementation guides that came there. So medical claims made it not only into the report, it also makes it into the viewer. There is a claims report in there, but pharmacy claims hadn't made it there yet. So in the most recent release, not just medical claims, but pharmacy claims are in there, and not just the medical claims that were in prior releases, but all of the information with medical claims. And so the new report is comprehensive and including all claim data is in order for users to be able to access and see that. So when we think about what we've done thus far, we're thinking about it in terms of streamlining that experience with the Nav app and the different options there. We're thinking about it with cross-version support. We're also thinking about enhancing the experience, right? Having it in the language that you want, the new graphs where you can manipulate that as you want, and with information that you're looking for, and expanding what's actually on offer. So what's coming next? So we're not done, is really the message here. We want to keep making it easier, not just to use, but to upgrade, to maintain, to implement. We want to continue down that pathway of configuration, no longer needing development skills in order to do some work and make changes, and continuing that seamless experience, just like I referenced from the UCR presentation, that there's a single login application. Now, right, we're working for single experiences across all of the Healthshare suite in a number of forums, And for us, that means work with the navigation application. So this is what it means at a feature level. You cannot use the viewer if it does not load. So performance is something that we have done queries on to understand who is reporting issues with performance, what the challenges around performance are, what the baseline data around performance is, how we can improve that, and you're going to see some work that's underway in that sphere. And then along that route of saying, you actually see a different, today, patient banner, potentially patient search screen, the way we manage consent and break the glass workflows differently depending on which part of the Healthshare product you are in. And we're working towards streamlining all of that, just like you've heard us talk about with the login app and nav app. So first with performance. Based off the data we've received, I've had conversations with many of you. We have had embedded code to evaluate what's occurring across many scenarios. We know some of you have the viewer as standalone application, some of you have it embedded in an EMR, some of you, right? There's all different ways you may be accessing this. It may be set up in many different ways. But at the end of the day, what we have learned thus far is that initial patient load is what matters. What I mean by that is user selects a patient name from wherever they may be selecting that. Could be from the patient search results, it could be from an EMR, it could be from wherever that is. And they may have to wait to actually view the patient data. And wait. And wait. And we want to do better. So we have captured all the baseline data. We already know we have sort of 3 pathways in which we're going to address this. Some of them are actually this week. I was getting emails this morning about how we're solutioning them. But basically, it falls into UCR fetch processing and the rendering time. We already have initiatives underway to address all 3 of these, because we want to make sure your users are not bypassing the viewer because they have to wait to get what they need. We want them to actually have the information they need when they need it as soon as they click that button. So you will see that in upcoming releases as we do that work. And then, as I mentioned, that continued focus on a unified approach. So this is actually in one of our project branches at the moment, so this is real, but it doesn't look terribly different than what you see maybe today in your patient search screens. The difference is that this behind the scenes has all the configuration that you need, so you wouldn't have to code anything. If you wanted to change a label, if you wanted to add a field, if you wanted to resequence things, if you wanted to make 3 of those fields required with 3 letters each, whatever that is. And so thinking about, right, many of you who have used the clinical viewer over time have had all of these special customizations for these use cases. And what we're doing is replacing that with something that you can configure based off your needs without adding code. That's obviously, I didn't mention, but obviously responsive. We know from utilization numbers that a part of that adoption of the new viewer has dramatically increased access to the viewer on mobile devices, tablets, phones, et cetera. So we can't touch patient search without also thinking about patient banner, right? This is something you also see every time you're within patient context on a patient. Patient banner is also something that today is a little bit challenging to configure. It has some limitations in the code. And so again, this is configurable fields. This is addressing, I see some of you in the room who've asked for consent messaging at the point of patient display of data, instead of just on the patient search screen, having access to the break the glass workflows from within that, and then choosing which fields you display, right? Some people want their cell phone number on the banner, some people just want the name, date of birth, et cetera. And then at that reference to consent messaging, dealing with the range of requirements depending on state regulations as well as national regulations and international regulations. Our current break the glass workflows don't necessarily give you the control you want to say at the end user level, what What do I want to tell them about what's going to happen if they override this? What do I want to capture in the audit logs? And what does that look like? So you'll see this change across many screens that obviously impacts both the search and the banner pieces that I just showed prior. And so then when we think about what all that means when you wrap it all together and why we're doing it sort of as a package deal, is because when going back to what I said about the navigation application, is that is your home for all things, including the viewer. That means if you're moving from the viewer to care community to something else that you have embedded as a third-party app that has patient context, you would not need to repeat that patient search. It would retain patient context against all the child apps that require it. And then for the non-context level apps, maybe the healthcare action engine or whatever that may be, you would then revert to non-patient context. So it's all shared together to have the user, again, be more seamless in their workflows without all of those interruptions. So what does that mean for us for the future? When we think about the viewer, we're interested in performance. We want it to be performant. We want the user to click on that name and get what they're looking for. We want it to be configurable, stop needing code, and we want it to be unified. And so you'll see some of that coming out and when we think about this, we're thinking about 12 to 18 months. And there's a couple of asks in this. I didn't call it out when I was on that slide, but to best address performance, we need to understand your patients. I know I come from Ascension, the largest US nonprofit, right? You know, we heard from Eduardo yesterday. And so I know what big patients look like, but sort of knowing conceptually and having data around that. When you say you have a big patient, are you talking about 10 years worth of data? Or are you talking about 40 years worth of data? We know we have customers with 40 years worth of data. What does 40 years worth of data look like when you talk about what volume of documents is that? What volume of lab results is it? It may not be that much for that one, but then when I talk to a cancer center, it may be very different. So my ask to you is to let me know. I have already actually tackled many of you in the hallways to ask that question, but it's also a general ask here. To make the viewer what you need it to be, we need to know what that is. And specifically around performance, we want to make sure we're measuring with the right metrics. So how do you let me know? This is my contact information. Do not hesitate to reach out and talk to me. I'm happy to engage with you on this. I've talked to many of you related to specific customer escalations or questions that you have. I'm happy to answer questions about sort of our road forward. But when we think about the viewer overall, we're really designing this to be standardized so you can use it as it is, and upgradable so you can move up quickly, and then unified, right? So your users aren't like, oh my goodness, this is a whole new something. What is this? But it's familiar and it works within their own workflows. All right, that's all I have, but I'm happy to answer questions if anyone has them.
In the unified view, you said there's also possibility to add an app. Is that just an app you create yourself, a website that you can just put it in?
Yep. So the Nav app today already supports third-party app embedding. And I know some of you may have seen this in demos, but you know, we've seen customers put everything from like Lexicomp up to date in there, right? Just to giving it their users access to something like that, to things that are patient context specific. We usually demo with a Smart on Fire pediatric chart app, but it can be any that you want to configure.
Just on the same lines, you mentioned you can pass the member context, but from a security perspective, would we be able to pass the user context?
Yes, absolutely. So we're leveraging sort of the framework within UCR itself to check all credentials, authentication, authorization, et cetera, to make sure, right, they still rely on the same resource configuration requirements for patient pet, fetch, search, et cetera, to make sure that they're passing all the security needs. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So I think for the viewer that we are using, there's the banner you were kind of talking about. had option to kind of do either export of information in a PDF format filtered, or do the CCDA, but the CCDA does not have filtering capabilities. It's just like the whole patient record. Is that something that is already at us, or?
Great question. So, this is covering about 12 months. What we're actively working on, so we can say, there's work in progress. We expect to deliver this. Something else we're working on that I'm not sure exactly what that timeline looks like is, you may know that our report infrastructure is Zen-based, and Zen-based is out of date. And so we're actually actively working to redo our report structure.
Mhm.
I can't promise what that timeline is, but part of that work is end user defined reports. So filters would be available across them. We have this whole master list of, date and encounter and provider and facility and all the things that you would think about standard at an end user control level. So again, following that theme of, we used to only predefine for you, and then you would have to predefine some more, and that's what you would give your users. We're thinking about this, say, we'll still predefine some for you, but then we want to put it in end user hands if you want to offer that to them, so that they can say, yes, this is the report I need. I just need this filterable information.
Hi. I saw the part of the localization of the menu. We're operating in different countries in Europe. And I was wondering if we wanted to add 1 or 2 languages. What would
Email
that be?
me.
Yeah,
It's a
okay.
great question. In fact, I meant to ask it at the time. What we did for our first 8 languages, that covers both the login application and nav app application, was query all of our entire global team and say, what do we have to have first? Adding new languages is much easier than that initial load of making sure the code supports all the languages. So come find me. Yeah.
I will do so. Thank you.
Something we've been looking to address is if there's ways contextually, not necessarily on a specific patient, I mean it is, but it's actually tied to document specific data within the chart books. If there is a way to what I'll call deep link to get, I know what my identifiers are from other applications, I want to launch into the clinical viewer to take me to it. And then subsequently, possibly, would be similarly, say from a document or something else, you have metadata, maybe that's attached to it, and I want to go to, say, a lab reference, or vice versa like that. Is there something you guys are looking at as far as ways to create something that will allow you to do that kind of switch within the app with a link of some sort?
Maybe. Let's talk offline on that one. That one's not straightforward. There's nothing clear cut, but there may be a way that we could help you with that even today. Yeah.
So there's a lot of talk about pretty much no code, right? But for those of us that maybe want the code, do you still have those capabilities?
Today, yes. I don't promise tomorrow is really the answer there, right? We're moving towards more and more standardization. We have not locked off more than you experience from moving from the classic viewer to the new. But there's definitely some of that thought process to say, we really want you to use what we offer and give you the options you need without needing code. If there's something we're missing, we want to know, right? We don't want to lock something off that you need, but we want to address these, as we work down this list to make it as low code as possible. All right, you can know where to find me. Did you have a question?
No, I just wanted to double check. So when you're saying no code, are you specifically talking about the clinical viewer? Because there's probably people in here who use Ensemble or Health Connect or
Correct.
Dash A, so
Yes, I'm
just to
talking
be
CV
clear.
specific.
Okay.
Yep, great clarifier. We have a long way to go, right, to give you everything you need without touching code. So there's a lot of work ahead of us. But you would have seen, even for the nav app is a good example of giving you terminal commands to start, giving you a config GUI in the most recent release, expanding that out, cross-referencing it, make sure it can do everything that we listed in terminal commands, and then moving on to the next piece, which will be part of that patient search banner work to say, can we give you all the configuration GUIs you need for all the work that you want to do there?
Thanks, appreciate it. So for that no code option that people keep throwing out there, Currently, we have the ability to export and import configurations, spin up new
Yes.
viewers. Is that going to be included in that? Because
Yeah.
then it
So
starts to sound like code. But
fair enough. Yes. So I mean, your giant layout file that exists in this blob that you can pull in and out is still true today. On the product side, we're working to break it out so we can fix things faster for you, things like that. But in terms of a timeline for when that will change, not near future.
I just want to, so if I do all my customization in configuration, does that mean I don't have to do the export and import when I upgrade?
Yeah, so you still have to do it, right? I mean, the configuration GUIs, et cetera, give you this is what I selected. But in terms of putting it into the new place, you're still doing that import export. Yep. All right. Thank you for being here. Have fun tonight. It's supposed to be great in the Tech Exchange. And feel free to find me with any other questions.